Here we go. Good morning, fellas. Here we
Good
are.
morning.
Jeff, you just piped in. Good morning to you. We're recording. So let's go ahead and get started in our study. It's 7:00. And we're in, as you're very, very aware, the Gospel of John. We're going to move ahead. Chapter 9, verses 6 and 7 this morning. Last time we threw out he placed on the table in front of us this idea of two very different ways that we think in regard to our faith. And it's probably something of which we kind of vacillate back and forth. But on the left-hand side is the commonality of the two ways of thinking is the current world status, which probably most of us would interpret as having some problems. And the one on the left states that, gee, I want out of here. My life is really for the life to come, and I want Jesus to come back and save us all from this. Why is it taking so long? And the one on the right is where I tend to lean, even though I would like out it sometimes. But it's work the works of him while it is yet day. I copied that from the text that we looked at last week, and it's instead of an escape, it's an engagement. And I think that's the kind of man I want to be, and I think that's the kind of man you want to be, is to engage in what is in front of us and to live our lives reflecting Christ in that manner. So today we're going to move to John 6 and 7, but I backed it up to verse 1 just for the context. And so I'll just read through this, and then we'll make some comments on verses 6 and 7. And so the setting is in verse 1. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man who had been born blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he would be born blind? Jesus answered, neither that this man nor his parents, but it was so the works of God might be displayed in him. And we've looked at that. We must carry out, we collectively, even though disciples in your flawed thinking, that I think that's very hopeful. We must carry out the works of him who sent me. I think it's interesting how he uses the personal pronoun there, me. Jesus is like us, but he's not like us. He is uniquely total humanity 100% of the time, and total God. We've got that in our belief, and I believe it as true. But I think it's very unique because a lot of this study and a lot of my language is centering around how Jesus is showing us how to be human. And what would be assumed is, or could very well be assumed, is Jesus just a pal like one of us. Well, no, he is uniquely the Son of God. He is the Word who has become flesh. He is uniquely the one. And I think this verse in an indirect kind of way states that. And then today's text is, as I said, verse 6 and 7. When he had said this, he spit on the ground, he made mud from the saliva, his own saliva, and he applied the mud to his eyes and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So he left and washed and came back seeing. I think, wow, what an amazing, my head is just filled with images here as we go into this. So first of all, observation, what do we have before us? And I'm not citing the blind man, because the blind man is, in a sense, directly in the text, and the action is taking place. So in relation and in conjunction with the presence of the blind man, what do we have? So we're going to start there. First of all, we have a blind crowd, and we've looked at this for weeks. This crowd that he's talking to, they are unable to see what truly is because of their self-created and sustained way of thinking. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning.
And
I'm going to have to be in. I got to go in and out. I want to say hi. We're out in South Carolina.
okay, well, good to see. Kind of, I see your right ear, left ear there. So good to see you.
You bet. Take care.
All righty. See ya. That's nice. Thanks for coming in, Bill.
Yeah.
There's a blind crowd, and there are also blind disciples. Again, of course, this is my interpretation, but these folks are certainly followers of Jesus, but they're blinded to the truth regarding the man's condition because they too are being directed by their own thoughts, their own way of thinking. I mean, they didn't miss a beat. They said, who's guilty here? Jesus, the man, or his parents? No, their heads are judging his condition a certain way. Therefore, they are blind. Blind crowd, blind disciples. And we have, in contrast, Jesus as the light of the world. Jesus is the light bringer as opposed to darkness. There's two references in the immediate text about Jesus as the light of the world, and that's opposed to darkness. Darkness is that which is the natural human state. If one is in a state of darkness, that same one can only stumble around within the darkness, being directed by their own devices. We need help from somewhere else because our natural state is darkness. They may also seek direction from others, but they too are only in darkness. So we get the blind leading the blind is what the condition is. And I had a note here, was thinking about this yesterday. Here's my thought. I have learned, this is a personal statement, of course, I have learned after experiencing and causing much unneeded pain, don't make decisions after 6 p.m. That's where my mind was yesterday, is that I know what, I'm in a transformational process, and so are you. But I have also learned to read the frailties of my own body over 67 years. And I know that about after 5, 6 p.m. in the evening, because I'm such an early riser, I don't have clear thinking. And it is way better not to go there in the evening. I often have these less waves of fear. When I was a younger man, I would actually break out in sweat sometimes in fear, primarily focused on the business. And I had to learn in a very hard way to just let this stuff go. It doesn't matter, back off. I'm saying that much more now. And it's not like the temptation to walk in darkness goes away. I still find myself in darkness. And when I make decisions after 6 o'clock, they're usually wrong, and they usually create difficulty for people. So that's one way. That's one way I looked at this, and I was thinking about this yesterday. Put that little side note in as a result. However, getting back to the text, if there is light, one can move about confidently because that same one can see what really exists. Picture yourself in a very dark space, and without light, we walk and we try to navigate. We want to move, and we just bump around. Our knees become raw over stuff we bump into. But if we have the light, we can see those things, and we can make judgments based on what is really there. And so therefore, it creates way less pain for myself and the others around me. It's the light that gives a person the ability to see. If one can see, then they are able to navigate in relation to what truly is. I think this is really the simplicity of what Jesus is, what's the backdrop of this healing. So now we go into the comments themselves in verse 6 and 7. Here's the text. When he had said this, he spit on the ground. He made mud from the saliva, and he applied the mud to the man's eyes. When within this context, Jesus stops at the question, who sinned? And he stops. He's somewhere near the temple, probably exited outside the temple. I'm not real sure, but somewhere near, within a few, let's call them city blocks. Jesus stops. He spits on the ground itself, and by using his own saliva, and I would say that would take a lot of saliva. You ever thought about that? My goodness, to take mud or take dirt and turn it into a paste, that took a lot of saliva. So this took some time, and he begins to work the saliva into the dirt and makes a mixture which would become an applicable substance. Note, there are two elements which make up this mixture, dirt and saliva. Now, my head is just going with imagery as I'm looking at this. Have any of you been around this area in Jerusalem? I know some of you have traveled there. Have you so you kind of know what I'm talking about here. Yeah, it's I'll talk a little bit more when we get to the pool of Siloam, but yeah, my head is just filled with stuff because I go, why all of this? Well, I think it's so interesting and so applicable. So I'm not quizzing you here, but let's call it the symbolism. What is the symbolism behind Jesus's action? And I'm not testing you here, between dirt and saliva. Where does your head go with that? Any thoughts? No thought. My mind, guys, and I'm just throwing some ideas out, we're friends here, is that from the very act of creation, we have, God in the garden making the man out of dirt. And right now, today's Ash Wednesday, in fact. Today is Ash Wednesday. That's amazing. And what do? They take ashes and they put a cross on your head, and you say from dirt, ash to ash. Is it ash to ash or dirt to dirt? I think it's ash to ash, isn't it, Bob? It's today is the very day of the year that we're, in our tradition, we're reminded of our mortality. And of course, it precurses it's a predecessor of Easter, the resurrection, that out of death comes life. That's great news. But Jesus takes the dirt of the earth, which I think is a symbol of all humanity, all that exists, all that God has breathed life into. And then he applies as the Word incarnate, the Word in flesh. He is the unique one that applies something from his body, his saliva, and he mixed that mixture, and it becomes that which is going to be the agency or the symbolism of the healing. So, that's where my mind is going. I really have fun with that. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. But I think there is some amazing symbolism here as we think about this at a broader perspective in relation to mankind. Makes me think of the painting called The Harrowing of Hell, as depicted by the Eastern Church, the resurrection, where you have the Adam. I've shown this, Adam in the middle. Not Adam. Jesus grabbing in the resurrected Christ, grabbing the limp wrists of Adam and Eve, representing all of the humanity, and pulling them out of the grave. And I love the empowering nature of Jesus's presence. And I see it all over this. So anyway, it's very exciting. this kneading. So then he goes into kneading and he's there. Man, I just give me some water, guys. He's it's kind of humorous to me to think how long it took him to do this. And it's the Sabbath day. We know that from verse 9:14. And everybody is watching in silence as they say, what in the heck is this guy doing? Now, I pulled a text from the Mishnah, which is the Jewish rabbinic commentary of the Old Testament. And this is from Shabbat 7:2. So it gives the laws of the Sabbath, what you cannot do. It's what's prohibited. And this is right from the text. So it says, this fundamental Mishnah or teaching enumerates those who perform the primary categories of labor, which is prohibited on the Sabbath, which numbers 40 less 1. So 39. They've got, they're very, very organized. 39 no's. These are 39 no's in relation to what you can't do on the Sabbath. And that's Jesus, it's a Sabbath, probably a designated Sabbath. They are grouped in accordance with their function. So this has to do with the harvesting, the gathering and the harvesting of wheat flour and the making of bread. So this is what you don't do. One who sows, you can't sow. One who plows, one who reaps, one who gathers the sheaves into a pile. Do you see the progression? And one who threshes, removing the kernel from the husk, the one who winnows threshed grain in the wind, the one who selects the inedible waste from the edible, the one who grinds, you see the process, you've got it pictured, and the one who sifts the flour in the sieve, the one who kneads the dough. You can't knead on the Sabbath. And that's where the correlation is. Jesus is kneading the mud, and that's where we're going to see in the text where the Pharisees really had issue with him, because this, in their mind, is breaking the Sabbath law as stated in Shabbat 7:2. You can't knead dough in the Sabbath. And finally, the one who bakes the bread. You can't do that. There are 39 of those there. Jesus is, in their minds, breaking the Sabbath, but nobody's saying that right now. Now in verse 7, we move on, and it breaks, they inserted number 7 right in the middle of a text here, and said to him, so he applied, in verse 6, he applied the mud and said to him, verse 7, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent, which John put in there for a reason. We'll talk about that. So he left and washed and came back seeing. Okay, he left and washed and came back seeing. This is the blind man. So once Jesus applied the mixture to the man's blinded eyes, he directs the man to go and wash out the mixture at the nearby pool of Siloam. It's all in the same area. I don't know, Steve, what do you think? 2 or 3 city blocks? A couple blocks?
When we were there, I don't recall sort of an estimate of where this would have taken place, but I think the pool has been excavated, basically. You can look down on it. It's multiple layers down. So yeah.
You probably saw it after I did. I saw it in 1978, and it was way down there. Most of the pictures that you see on the internet are what I saw. I don't know what it is today. They probably have a gift shop there somewhere. I don't know. But
well, I don't know about that, but I mean, it's multiple archaeological layers. You know, so you stand and look over the edge at the pool.
What's cool about this is it states in scripture that this was the water source for all of the temple activities. That they took a lot of water in the temple. And so they would come to the pool of Siloam to get that. So it was a major water source for the area. And Jesus instructs the man to go and wash in that pool. And now, side note, my mind naturally goes, this is outside of what we just talked about. My mind, again, I'm thinking imagery here, right or wrong. It goes to Genesis 49:10, where it talks about a prophetic stating of the tribe of Judah, and how the sword will not depart out of Judah, the kingly tribe, until Shiloh come. And unto him shall the gathering of the people be. Now, Steve, again, that verse really is ingrained into our thinking as coming from our, heritage, that this is a reference in our minds to Christ, this Shiloh, and it's really related to the term Siloam. It's not mentioned in the text, but it's interesting that here, Shiloh is right in front of the peace bringer, is right in front of them. And I in my mind, I tie this in. I have no idea if the crowd did. There's nothing stated. It's also interesting. The root of the word Shiloh and Siloam are the same. They're three letters. They're three letters, and it's just where you put the little dash, whether it's a sh sound or a s. A soft S or a hard S. So hard S. So anyway, it just depends. So it's related. And it's interesting as you look at Siloam, the pool of Siloam, there is a meaning within that. In some context, it's used to let go. It's a letting go. Oh, my mind's really going on this now. Letting go. The man is directed to this pool of Siloam, letting go. So now let's get back to reality. but returning to what is in front of us, meaning, John, he didn't say letting go. He didn't want us to learn that. He said sent. This man is being sent to sent. Returning Siloam, which is sent. So he's being sent to sent, which I think is kind of interesting. Now, I went ahead and did a search on sent as used in the Gospel of John, the word sent. And here's the text. I'm not going to read them. I'd like to leave some time for discussion. I just picked out three. I think these are the three times it is said, and then I correlated them right here. It's the idea of sent. The idea of sent has to do with response. This is where my mind is going in this text, is this man is being directed with this muddy mixture on his eyes. He is being sent to the pool of Siloam, which is being sent, and it has this whole thing it has the idea of response. And I'll get to that here. There it is, to respond. And I'd like for us to think about response. This man is responding to Jesus's directive. And that seems, well, that's not, that seems pretty benign. I think it's profound, a response. So let's continue on. Verse 7, same verse, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So he left and he did exactly as Jesus said, and he came back seeing. And that's going to set the scene for what's coming. Now, here's my comment. The pool of Siloam is a place of response or receptivity. And here is why. I actually spent an entire, almost a day exploring this whole region. In those days, you could go around, there wasn't anybody watching the bank. And I hiked it, did Hezekiah's tunnel, crawled through a small little opening within the tunnel, climbed up Warren's shaft. And I was in areas that now you have to pay to get in, but nobody cared in those days. And I was really, this was really a fun adventure. Now, the Gihon Spring is located outside the city wall. That is the water source, the Gihon Spring. Well, what they did was they had to figure out how to get that water within the confines of the wall. So if the city was ever under siege, they'd have water, and they didn't want the enemy to get the water. So what you do is you have some kind of shaft. Now, they first discovered this, before the 12th century BCE. And so they didn't have iron, they had bronze, and they had to figure out how to dig this shaft. And so they were really limited. And that's why you had the vertical Warren shaft. And that's why you got Jebus climbing, or not Jebus, who was the guy, David's right-hand man. But anyway, you got a lot of history around this area. Well, during the time of Hezekiah, which would have been around the 6th century BCE, they had iron, and they built this water shaft called Hezekiah's Tunnel. And this is a horizontal shaft that ties the Gihon Spring to the pool of Siloam. The point being, there is no water source at the pool of Siloam. It receives its water from the Gihon Spring via the Hezekiah's Tunnel, which is there. You can go through. I'm sure they charge for it now. But the point is, it's a place of receptivity. The pool of Siloam is not a water source. It receives its water from the Gihon Spring via the Hezekiah's Tunnel. The water within the pool then becomes a source for the entire temple area. Jesus sent the man to this place in order to receive his sight. And of course, I'm asking why this time, why this place, and so forth. And we're talking about it. He then becomes, by following the words of Jesus, he becomes a sight bearer to all who interact with him, as we will see. This man was sent to Siloam. It was this place of receptivity that he received the wonderful gift of sight. And I think receptivity is vitally important. And of course, it's from my perspective. Now here's a side note. Again, this just blows our minds. Note the completeness of this healing. It's really quite amazing when you consider the physiology underlying what occurred. This guy was born from, or he was blind from birth. That means, he didn't know what a tree looked like. It'd be different if he was blinded as a youth, because you could still have an imagery of a tree. You could have different kinds of trees. But this man didn't have any of that because he was born blind. And so you've got this thing going on in our heads, the physiology of the actual light coming in through our eyes, and then it's being sent to our brains, and it's being placed within imagery categories. I don't know how it works, but it's got to work that somehow like that. So we can interact and make decisions based on what is seen. This guy had none of that, but yet all of that was placed there during this healing. Not only did his eyes start working, but his brain and his eyes started working together. And I think that is an amazing thing in how that worked. So here's a summary. When he had said this, he spit on the ground, made the mud, and applied the mud to the eyes. And then he said, go wash in the pool of Siloam, translated said. So he left and washed and came back seeing. So what we have within the section of John's gospel, it's all about seeing. Everything is about seeing and not seeing. It's true. So I'm making some comments here. It's true that we as people can be alive and yet not see. Case in point, the crowd, the disciples, they are seeing, but they are not seeing as things really are. And that's true. It's also true that we as people can amplify this state of non-seeing as we interact with the peers. This is what we see happening in the crowd, this crowd think. And we tend to group ourselves around common non-seeing, thus the problems in the world today. You know, we are grouping in relation to a commonality of non-seeing, and it creates real problems. It's true that we as people can believe in Jesus, but yet see through the lens of self-imposed constructs. Here is the difficulty, the problem, which is the human condition, which these self-imposed constructs that we tend to amplify, which side are you on kind of thing, and it causes great problems. It's true, and it's finally true that we as people can receive sight. There's that receptivity word again. We receive sight through the exercise of receptivity. We believe there's a one-time thing where we receive Christ. Guys, I would propose that it is something we need to do and exercise every single day. At least once, is I receive you. I receive what you're doing in and around and through me today. And I think that's what we're being called to. It's not left field. It's how we, I think we're just giving language to this. So the table time is good. We got 30 minutes. That's good. The man was sent to a place of receptivity, this pool of Siloam. And in that place, he received his sight. He washed at this location and he returned seeing, just as he was directed by Jesus of Nazareth. And so let's talk about this idea of receptivity. It can really make us angry. It can really intrigue us. And let's talk about this. Questions, comments, concerns, downright fears regarding this idea of receptivity as it relates to one's ability to accurately see. How does receptivity relate to my ability to see? Or my lack of receptivity in relation to my inability to see. The two, I would look at the two as, the same discussion. So what are your thoughts, guys?
Mike, I see an element of obedience in this, or responsiveness maybe. Thinking about how you've sort of set the stage for this, Israel is a very dry land. And you've said, they must have been close, or they were close to the pool of Siloam. One, Jesus uses his own saliva They could have just proceeded to the pool and used the water there to make the mud.
Yeah, yeah,
And secondly, the miracle could have been performed and finished right there where they were, rather than a second step of him having to go in blindness
yep,
to the pool,
yep,
which
yeah,
I see as sort of an obedience to the directive, and a sense, maybe a matter of faith to say, I believe this is going to work, even though it's not yet complete. And
yeah.
I've got to do step number 2 here.
And he was involved in it. The blind man, in this case, he was involved. He had to get to the pool. So very good. Yes, I agree. And what you're hitting on there, Steve, is why did it happen like this? I think that's so interesting. Yeah, because there's a lot of could-haves, and those could-haves are not what we see, but we see a man stepping out in obedience, just as you said, and by golly, it worked.
No, Mike,
That was pretty
I was
cool.
thinking as you were saying receptivity, how each individual is receptive in their own personal way, how that the records in the Bible are so different from like the centurion who said to Jesus, say the word only and my son will be healed. I don't need any big anything. And then you got Naaman and Gehazi. It's like, you send your servant out. I thought you'd wave your hands and call upon your God and do all these things.
Oh, yeah.
And you're telling me to jump in this dirty river to be healed. That's crazy.
That's a good
And,
analogy.
And it's I think Jesus, has this insight that what's it going to take for this guy to receive his healing? It's not going to be enough in this instance, I'm speaking for Jesus now, but it's not going to be enough for me to just say you're healed.
Yeah.
He's going to need to do something. Stretch forth your hand, go around the city 7 times, bang a pot.
Yeah.
None of that has any power in and of itself, but it brings the person to the place where they can accept this grace. And everybody's different, and so when I see people doing things like today, everybody's going to get an ash on their forehead.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, what's that all about? Well, that's what they need. That's what they want. It's no good and bad in this. It's a point of focus. And if it brings you closer, God bless you.
Yeah.
But for somebody else, it may not. And let them live their life too.
Mhm.
For this guy, he needed spittle and mud in his eye.
Yeah. So what we have, Vince, is the man received, he was receptive because he acted through with what he was told. He was sent to sent, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And it in its very nature, in the physical, the pool itself is a place of receptivity. That's just mind-blowing to me.
I think for him, it made sense. It may not be for the next guy.
Yeah.
Is that personal?
Right. Yeah.
There may be another parallel and symbolism at play here too. In a little bit of my study, my understanding is that in the older Hebrew tradition and later Jewish, there was a belief that the spittle of the firstborn son held healing properties.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah.
So the firstborn son of a group or a family was judged or believed by using that spit to be able to
Wow, that's great.
to bring about healing. Well, here is the firstborn son, Jesus, using his spittle to bring about healing. And not only that, but he uses his own spittle to mix with the very source from which we came, the dust, the earth.
Wow, I love it.
And that is a poultice, if you will, that would be a pretty powerful healing element, I would think. And then you couple that with what Vince is saying, Jesus understanding that each individual is going to be given a certain measure of faith to either say the word and that's all I need, or I got to do all this marching and all this other stuff. So I think Jesus had things pretty well figured out about what needed to happen here and how it was going to happen.
Yeah.
I also think it's very important, at least to me, it's been a burr under my saddle. I think sometimes we get overly confused about ashes. One of the common things, particularly mentioned at funeral and memorial services, is the phrase "ashes to ashes, dust to dust." That is not a biblical comment.
Oh,
Nowhere in Scripture does it say ashes to ashes, dust to dust. We were not created out of ashes, which represents something that has been destroyed. We were created out of the dust of the earth.
interesting.
And there are numerous references about ashes in Scripture, and really going all the way back to Genesis with Abraham, where it's easy to get the connotation that it's ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Yeah. That's not what Scripture says.
That is a great clarification. So that, my analogy, I just kind of realized today was Ash Wednesday, but the dust and ash are not the same thing. And that's really, that's
so
really
with Job,
they
it was
say that
dust
no,
out
Ash
came,
went,
dust out return in Job.
Vince, we're walking on each other. You go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask Dave, like from Job, where he's sitting in a heap, scraping his boils with pot pieces. Wasn't there something where it's like from dust thou art and dust out return, or something like that?
Well, I don't know. I've got those phrases pulled up here in Job 13. It does say your remembrances are like ashes, your bodies to bodies of clay. But I don't. Again, you can do your own word search if one is interested, and I would encourage you to do that. But the common phrase that I'm using, that I'm hanging my saddle burr on, actually comes from the Episcopalian Book of Common Prayer. They put that in there, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and it's been widely assumed and assimilated by many of us. And for me, spiritually, it can lead us into a wrong path of connotation pretty easily, because I don't believe I was created out of something destroyed. I was created out of something that God made brand new.
I'll be thinking of that all day, Dave. That's really good. Really like that. Yeah.
Anyway, the spittle, the parallel of the firstborn son and the spittle is just
that's really good.
Really amazing.
Yeah, imagine, just for a minute, guys, I know there's others that want to say something, but Dave, when you were talking, I was thinking about, I was really taken back with how long this would have taken for a guy to be spitting in a little something of, however, what container he had, I don't know, and making this, and everybody's watching. And what you're saying gives understanding. It would have really driven that point home, because, I have no doubt what you're saying is true. They would have connected with that, and they would have seen that symbolism. The dust and the saliva of the firstborn. That's a cool idea. I really like that. Over time, it really. Whoop. Anyway, I've said enough here. What? Anybody else? What about receptivity?
Well, Mike, my head was going everywhere on this. Being a guy who's had to go through vision tests his entire, Air Force career, and
oh yeah,
so watching my vision degenerate throughout the years. My thought was, when we first get saved and Christ opens our eyes to the truth, we see pretty clearly. but things in life and time can cause our our eyes or our vision of the truth to be warped, to be
Oh, my God.
affected by the world, be affected by those things in our lives. And I think that we need to keep, like you were saying, that receptivity in the forefront, because am I doing anything in my life that, or putting things in my life that affect that receptivity, that affect my ability to see what is true, and and do things like put on spiritual glasses or have spiritual, LASIK surgery or whatever you want to call it, to make sure that my vision is clear, by getting back into the Word and by being with others that know the truth and live the truth. I need to keep those things out of my life that affect that receptivity of what is true and what Christ is trying to say to me through my life.
That's a mouthful. That is a mouthful, because my human tendency is to reject what I perceive as not true. And I'm learning to not so fast.
Mhm.
And that's a scary, vulnerable thing. That's really,
Well, and like I'm taking like a vision supplement to try to keep my eyes from
really,
getting worse. It's I don't even know if it does anything, but it's one of those things where we can do that in our spiritual lives. We can take supplements. We can dig into the Word. We can be in fellowship and be in prayer that keeps our vision from degenerating by the effects of the world around us.
This section of scripture here, I think, again, is another parallel, like Mike, you pointed out. At this particular point in time, it's clear that the scripture says the disciples were with him and this was happening. And their first question or statement was, well, who's at fault here?
yeah,
So here are these believers, these people walking side by side with Jesus, and yet he's having to show them that we're going to go out into the world and you're going to see and you're going to encounter things. And if you don't see it in my light, but if you see it in your own, you're going to get off base, you're going to get off track, which is just what's being talked about here. We have this receptivity issue, and I won't go down that path again, but I call that, or I think that takes the form of expectancy rather than expectation.
yeah, yeah,
Well, and another example there, Mike, and just what Dave was saying is they were allowing their preconceived notions or whatever, the stuff of the world, to cloud their thinking right off the bat. Who sinned, him or his father? What caused this?
yeah. It was a slam dunk in their heads.
Right. But what I found, and I don't know if anybody sees this or not, but the more time I spend on my small screens, my phone or my iPad or whatever, after a while of doing that, you look up and you can't see very good. When I'm putting things into my life and letting the things of the world cloud my vision, then I can't see clearly the things that Christ wants, and I don't see them the way, like Christ said, you're not seeing it the way I'm seeing it. It wasn't his parents, it wasn't him. It's so that you guys can see, what I'm going to do as the light of the world, basically.
Yeah.
So we the more time we spend with our vision on the world, the less we're going to see the truth that Christ wants us to see. There's things coming into our eyes or our mind that cloud the truth, and I think it's important that we We spend a whole lot less time focusing on what the world says is right and focusing on what the word says is right.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah. Yeah. What about other comments here, guys? Thank you.
I was saying I really liked what Jeff had to say about the in the beginning you can see and clearly, and that was true for me. And what I found in later years now is when I start getting self-centered or self-directed or whatever in terms of me trying to decide or see things, from my own perspective, which, as you guys know, it's kind of always been colored by my racial inferiority complex. So what I have to do is I have to get, and this lesson has been good because the receptivity is I have to really learn to go back and see the way I used to see actually when I was first born again. This has been a great exercise today.
Yeah. Like daily.
So a willingness to be receptive, huh?
Yes.
Right. And so the disciples had been with Jesus a period of time now. I'll say a couple of years. I think he's heading into the home stretch. I think he's 6 months out or so from the crucifixion. But they, and like us, right, here we are in our spiritual journey. And we have these things that we know to be true. I mean, I wonder, so Jesus was passing by, and I don't know if he was even going to stop, right? And there's no interaction here with the blind man crying out, Son of David, mercy, mercy on me, right? There's no, or please heal me, or how Jesus asks sometimes, do you want to be healed? Right? Do you want to see? What can I do for you? And there's none of that. And then it's like, why did he take the time to make the spittle and the dirt and the mud?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so you're watching this all go down, and then he sends him away. So how did he get to the pool of Siloam if he's blind? Right? How did he get there? And then you get the sense that Jesus was waiting for him to come back. So there's this whole time that's taken place that, he goes and washes and come back. And then everybody says, whoa, we can see now.
Yeah. Did he come back? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I taught it and I don't even remember.
Yeah. So
He left him. He came back seeing. He came back to him. You're right, John.
Right. So, do we see ourselves as blind? And, how blind are we? And like Jeff's saying, the older we get, glasses and not being able to see and the things that distract us. But what is the big picture that, why did Jesus do this? What's the big picture that, and the book of John just really wants to affirm to us that this Jesus is the light of the world. I mean, he's God incarnate. He is, the Messiah. This is a different deal than anything, the Jews have known up till now. And these self-constructs we have those too, right? We have our faith traditions and things that we hold pretty tight to. So Jesus comes and he keeps challenging them. Like the verse before, a week or so ago, Jesus says, I'm saying to you, you're going to die in your sins, for unless you believe that I am he, you're going to die in your sins.
Yeah.
So this whole thing of sin, that's the conversation, who's sin, right? I think most of us don't think in terms of I'm a sinner, right? And what's the problem with being a sinner is I can't see, right? I can't understand things. I don't understand life. As we started, I mean, in the beginning, John 1, it says, in him was life. The life was the light of men.
I like that. Life and
And the
light.
light shines in the darkness, and the darkness doesn't comprehend it.
Wow. Beautiful.
And then he goes on and he says, there was John the Baptist now, he's saying, there was a true light which comes into the world that enlightens every man, right? And he's talking about Jesus, and then he says, the word became flesh, and then the idea of receiving him to have light, right? To be able to see. Mm-hmm. So I think the bigger thing here is that, how do we see, right? And it's interesting that every time Jesus heals a blind person, he does it differently, I think. And, how is it? If he were to send us off, I think maybe Steve was saying this, go to the pool and wash, we would say, well, hey, wait a minute, how am I going to get there? Or why not just heal me? Or, there's so many other things, but are we going to be obedient in our spiritual journeys? And basically, I think the obedience, the receptivity, right? And then the obedience has a lot to do with being able to see.
Could we say that sin is spiritual cataracts?
Yeah, it's probably an understatement, huh? But there again, I don't see myself as sinful, right? Very much. I'm basically a good guy, thank you. So, but these cataracts that keep getting bigger and worse, do I acknowledge them or want to deal with them, right?
We'll call them floaters. They go by every now and then. Beat that metaphor into the ground here.
Mike, I think one of the key words you have written there is accurately. I think we can all see at times, but sometimes our spiritual vision is not accurate because something's in the way, and I don't completely understand the way eyes work, but there's the eyes receive whatever the object is, and then it's transmitted to the brain, which accurately says this is a moose or whatever.
Yeah.
And there are times when we allow things into our lives that we go, well, that's not a moose, that's a cow. Or, we don't see accurately, because between us seeing it, it has to go through, and I don't know if it was John that said, it's like the filters we have in our lives. Sometimes our own constructs, our own filters don't allow us to see accurately. And we have to come back to the creator of life or of light to be able to see accurately. And that to me is the key is many times I'll read something in scripture, but I'll see something in life and I'll form an opinion on it that is not accurate because I haven't filtered it through the lens of Christ. I've filtered it through my own, filter and my own constructs.
Mm-hmm. And it's
Hey, Bob Powell, we haven't heard from you.
I'm still here. I just been thinking about the underlying cause or underlying foundation of sin in our lives? And is it not that we become self-righteous?
Mm.
That we are replacing Christ's righteousness, which is our gift. We inherit that. We're replacing it with our own righteousness.
Would you call that a proneness, a human proneness?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. You know, life goes by fast and
It's in my life.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden you wake up and you think, wow, how far have I gotten away from where I'm supposed to be?
Yeah.
I think
But
that also brings in.
I think you can take anything that we would classify as sin, and you can find, and you can take it all the way back to the root of that is that we've replaced Christ's righteousness in us with self-righteousness.
There was a point in a group that I used to go to that they were so conscious and taught so fervently that we are the righteousness of God in him, and as he is, so are we in this world, and seated in the heavenlies of Christ, and all of this stuff, that you had no sin consciousness at all.
Yeah.
That when you thought of yourself, you thought of yourself as Christ is in God's eyes. But the what happened was, you know, people got so arrogant that they thought, I'm sinless. You know, I didn't, instead of looking at it as a gift of grace that Jesus paid it all on our behalf, it became like, and I don't blame him. I mean, look at me. I mean, who wouldn't die for me? You know, it's, you got arrogant. People got very arrogant and thought of themselves as righteous on their own. And that this Jesus thing was almost unnecessary.
Mm-hmm.
It got really, really crazy. I mean, it's a great thing to be confident in yourself, but it is another thing to say that, you know, you're all that, you know, because of who you are. It's a tipping point.
Right.
So
So
how
I
do
think-
we, yeah,
Yeah, I think the one thing I've heard is how willing am I to be receptive? And Mike's idea, is there a correlation between receptivity as it relates to one's ability to accurately see,
yes, yeah,
right? And so am I willing to even have this conversation to begin with? And then Jesus, you know, John says, you know, but as many as received him, right? In First John, to them does he give the right to become the children of God. Is
wow, I love it.
right. So the receptivity idea, and that's the conversation here in this chapter is, right? Jesus says, and we kind of skipped over that, I'm the light of the world. And what in the world does that mean? Does that mean he was the best teacher ever? And he probably was, but you know, do we see it just as an information dump that he's going to make everything clear, or is there something bigger going on here?
Good comments. Guys, I'm gonna have to shut us down, or at least I can leave it open, but I have to leave. And I've got an appointment. So do you guys want to call it a day, or do you want to stay on?
I'm gonna have to leave.
I
Okay,
gotta go too.
all righty. Guys, thanks for your comments. What a graphic text. We're gonna move into more of the responsiveness of this next week. Boy, everybody will say, go Jesus. Man, you did a great job.
Just
We'll
think
see
about
next
the
week.
song, the old song from Johnny Nash. I can see clearly now. Clouds are gone.
Hey, Dave.
Well,
Yes, don't
Dave,
sing. Don't sing.
Dave,
Yes,
stay close to your phone. I need to talk to you.
okay.
okay, bye for now,
All
guys.
right, see ya.
Yeah,
Bye.
so long.